All right, I wanted to share some thoughts on Dorico versus Finale. I've been a Finale user for about 20 years, and like many of you guys, I used it. I do appreciate many things about it. It's a mature program. It's been around a long time. It's not going anywhere, and but I did find myself wondering in the back of my mind if there were some things that I was doing on Finale that I assumed had to happen, were just part of score prep, that actually weren't or didn't need to be. And lo and behold, that's the case. Let me just share a couple thoughts for you, and then we'll look at some things. This is not really going to be so much a Q&A about what Dorico does. There's some excellent tutorials put out by John Barron, Anthony Hughes at the Dorico YouTube channel. There's all sorts of stuff, immensely helpful. There's a lot of documentation that's growing. There's a huge user community. So rather than answering questions about what it does, I really particularly want to compare it to Finale, and honestly try to make a compelling case for why I've switched and why I think other people should switch as well. So the first and the most basic reason is just time. Let's assume any decent notation program, we're all going to get the same result. Eventually, the question is, how long does it take to get there? And I think secondarily, how does the process of getting there affect even the process of composing or arranging? What impact does it have? So here's how it works for me for time. Right now, actual pure note entry, it's a wash. I have to confess, I do miss speedy entry on Finale. I'm still a little faster on Finale. It's pretty close to equal. When it comes to speedy entry with a MIDI keyboard, it's definitely the same. Dorico may even be faster there. There's no doubt that's going to change, and I'm going to talk in a minute about. Well, I'll show you some different ways to do note entry. Entry of details is definitely faster, no question. Slurs, articulations, dynamics, bar lines, meter changes, anything, you name it. Dorico's definitely faster about that. Layout is just tons faster, and that's actually the biggest time saver for me. So I'll show you the modes in a minute, but the bottom line is, generally when I finish in write mode, and I've set my settings like I want them, I don't have to do much. Which I remember talking to Paul Thompson, and I remember him saying, look, we all understand you have to spend a couple hours tweaking the score, and we just don't have to do that anymore. So basically, if that means hours saved per project, you multiply that over the next decade or whatever, and that's huge. Multiplied through countless projects. Second's native functionality. In Finale, I was really, really proud of all these macros and plugins and workarounds that I had learned, built up over the years. You still need a few workarounds in Dorico because the program is still growing, but you basically, most of these things have gone away. Even something like splitting the measure, it's something you used to have a plugin for. You just don't need that anymore. Also, looking forward, with Finale's a mature program, but the development is really stalled. Finale 25 is now 64-bit architecture, which is huge, and they have squashed some bugs, but it's really difficult for them to move forward and even make major changes. They have a user base that's used to a certain workflow, and they also have what I heard one of the Dorico founder refer to as technical debt, which means all this accumulation of old code built up. And that makes it really, really hard for them to make the sort of changes they want to make. So Dorico doesn't have that. Really rapid development pace, and the way that I've seen it, even in the past 6 months, I've been following it for about a year. Basically, they go from 1 month, they'll say, yeah, we can't do that yet. And then the next month or two, when they introduce the update, now they not only can do it, but they do it better than anyone else has ever done it before. That's just been their consistent pattern. So I've just been thrilled with that. Daniel Spreadberry, the founder, the lead guy on that. He's on the forums. He's answering questions personally. A lot of guys from the development team, so the response is really snappy. That's just been thrilling. And then the final reason is it's a great all-in-one solution. I don't really need InDesign anymore, which I'll show you in a little bit. And I don't really need a DAW. If you're doing this is not designed to be a DAW. So if you need to do a lot of legit audio editing, obviously you still need that. But for what I need here, this really does everything I need. Let's go ahead and jump into some essential differences. So the first difference is this. While Finale is really menu intensive and click intensive, Dorico is easy to switch between modes and functions and use something called Popovers. So let me just show you an example of how that works here. So I'm gonna start a new project. I'm gonna add a solo player. Let's call him lead. And we'll let everything populate here. And here we go. So it's blank. You notice that there's no bars. There's nothing really added. And when I go in here, I could start entering notes, but for starters, let me show you the modes. So there's 5 modes. There's setup mode, write mode, engrave, play, and print. The way you hit these, you can either do them through the mouse or by Control 1, Control 2. That's kind of the easier way to switch between them. Control 3, Control 4, and Control 5. So setup mode is where you set up all your players. Down here you can add players, you can put them in groups, you can add ensembles, and you do something called flows. So here a flow is essentially the name of your piece. So my new song. And flows, you can think of these as multiple movements. You can think of them as multiple exercises, whatever you want. But flow is a really powerful way, and you can create new flows right here. I'll be talking more about flows later, but you can switch between modes. But primarily, you think of modes in terms of your actual workflow. So I've created all my stuff in setup mode, and I'm going to switch to write mode now. So actually, let me go back to setup. Let me go ahead and add a couple people. I'll add a piano. I'll add, let's see, string quartet. Let's see, so one violin. Add another violin. You see it's grouping them, which is similar to what Finale does. Viola. There's other shortcuts for this. I think it's Control P or something. No, that's not it. That's print. I'm still learning my shortcuts. And we'll add a cello. All right, so I've got my setup here. So I'm going to switch to write mode. Now again, the whole point of this, I want to be really careful to continually say, not merely here's how you do it in Dorico, but what's compelling and better. So you can do keyboard or MIDI entry, but let me show you some things called popovers. So I'm going to hit select here, and I'm just going to start doing some things. So if I want to change the meter, I'm going to use the meter popover. Now, by the way, you can do all these over here. So I could go here, and this is what's similar to Finale, right? I could go over here and I could do my meters. I could have complex meters, all that stuff. But the much easier way to do it is just to select your thing, and Shift M hits the meter popover. Let's do 4/4. Actually, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go 4/4 with a pickup bar. Oops, 4/4 with a pickup bar, 1 beat. And now I'm going to add some bars. So let's go Shift B. We'll add 20 bars. There you can see it's my pickup. I'm going to put it in the key of, let's see. So here we go for Shift K. I'm going to put it in the key of G minor. I could either type G minor, I could type a small G, I could type 2 flats. I'll just do it this way. So key of G minor. So you can see that, and this stuff works all throughout the piece, right? So if I wanted, let's say, a double bar line before this guy right here, I just go Shift B, two of those, whatever you call them, I can't remember, hit Enter, and there it is. Now let's go ahead and enter some notes here. So I'm going to go into note entry mode. There's a lot of things I could show you here, but I'll just kind of start off on the very basic thing. So you see this, this is really similar to Finale. One difference I'm having to get used to is that it is duration first and then your note. So there's a couple ways that I could do this, right? Let me go ahead and delete this stuff here. I'll start after my pickup bar. I could do the MIDI keyboard, which I've done. One other difference is that the quarter note is now 6 instead of 5. Took a little getting used to. I've heard some people say, coming from Finale, oh, I'm going to remap all my keys. You can do that. There's a lot of customization, but I really encourage you not to. I had a guy tell me, just think of it like practicing your scales, and in no time you'll be able to just go, C, D, F, G. I'm typing on the keyboard right now. F, E, D, C, B, A, G. Now it finds the closest interval. So if I'm going to go C, it's going to give me that one. If what I wanted were the bottom C, there I do it, and then I just transpose the octave. So that's entirely on the physical keyboard. MIDI is still faster. So I like both of them. I can definitely see the advantages of doing it this way. All right, let me just show you some things again. I don't want to be comprehensive, but let me just kind of show you some things here. What are some more popovers? Yeah, so Shift A is the Rehearsal Popover. By the way, I can always modify these at any time. I can have different kinds of sequences. I can have a prefix or a suffix. I could call it verse 1. There's any number of things I could do, but I have full control over all these things. I can make a slash region, so I'm going to select an area. I'm going to go Shift R, and I'm going to write slash. So that's really handy. I can also move stuff around, and I can adjust that kind of slash area. Let's go ahead and type some notes here. So Shift L for lyrics. Hi, I'm able to use this. Is a strange song. Yeah. So what I'll do, I'll go here, arrow key over, and I'll slur those together. So I do find the usage of it really intuitive. You'll notice that stuff gets spaced out really nicely. I'll talk more about that later. You can repeat whole sections. I'll grab a section and I'll hit R, repeated it to the next thing. I just switched to Galley View, by the way. Galley View is Control-Alt-2. Page View is Control-Alt-1. Galley View is like Scroll View in Finale, if you're used to that. You also have quick keys for X and Y. You can pinch to zoom, which I like. They're still working on the functionality of side-to-side swiping. It's a little touchy, I find. It's a little jumpy, but again, the speed of that. Oh yeah. So Aaron, how do you make a dotted note? So, but you basically just hit the dot. So I'm going to go to entry mode. Now there are a couple really cool ways to do this. Ooh, I'll wait. I'll come back to that. All right. So here's the section where I'm going to show you this, Aaron. I'm going to answer your question, and this is the second kind of cool thing. So first of all, Finale is menu intensive largely. Dorico, you can keep your hands in the keys. You don't have to use the mouse a lot, and you don't have to exit one mode to go to a different mode. You stay put. Your hands stay on the keys. I like that a lot. You can even be in write mode like I am now. You can hit, you can hit Shift B. You can do any kind. I made a little tick bar line. I could change the key signature now to be, I don't know, E flat. I could change the time signature to be, let's go 3 plus 3 plus 2 over 8. Yeah, we'll just do that. Okay, sure. And what's really cool, let me hide this over here. What's really cool is that it adapts, responds. So this is where now I transition to the second part. In Finale is rhythm is bounded by meter, and Dorico, rhythm flows across meter. Now, if you used Finale, you know that you get that dialog box that says, "Hey, you have too many notes in a bar." Well, it doesn't happen that way in in Dorico, because Dorico is, in a sense, it's smart. It accommodates. So let's just say I'm gonna enter some quarter notes here. Now let's say that next I wanted to switch to a half note. I'll go ahead and switch, doing 7 to my half note, and I'll play this. You can see that it automatically sends it across the bar. And in fact, if I exit out of this and I try to select just one note here, I can do that. But if I select one note here, it selects both. The reason why is because Dorico treats this as one event, and so it doesn't think of those as two separate things. Now you can use ties if you want to, but in general, I find that Dorico does a lot better job of interpreting durations. Let me show you one example. So one really common rhythm that I see a lot is, or that I use a lot, is this kind of a guitar rhythm. Dun 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 dun. Well, if you analyze that, it's a whole bunch of dotted eighth notes tied together, but it looks kind of funny. In Finale, you have to do all this work. Well, in Dorico, the way you do it is you just go, you just do your 5 and your dot. Your 5 and your dot, which takes you to your dotted quarter, or your dotted eighth. And now watch this. And then I'll take off the dot. So you see that each of these, it is a dotted eighth note. It just interprets it. It groups it. Now watch this. I'm going to grab, I have this note selected. I'm going to hit Shift-Alt, and I'm going to go over, and I'm going to extend the length of this. And see that as I'm extending it, it always just flows across the measure. Oh, by the way, I can do anything I want. Watch this. I'm just going to hit this bar line here and hit delete. Dorico doesn't care. So in this sense, it's a lot more, and this is where I think, Josh, where you might be interested in this, it really speaks to the compositional process amazingly well, because it's more like writing on paper in that sense. In Finale, I always find myself up against these constraints where before I can get my ideas out, I have to set up these things, and I have to work within metrical constraints. You don't have to do that in Sibelius. Yeah, faux pas. You don't have to do that in Dorico. And incidentally, yes, Aaron, I think you were saying, yeah, Dorico's like Sibelius. And, basically the development team for Dorico is the former development team for Sibelius. Is it better? I can't speak to that. Everybody says yes. But there are more similarities, I think. So I love those kind of things. Let's see. So let's go back here, and I'm going to change the meter to something more groovy. So Shift M for meter, and I'm going to change it to 7/8. Now when I change it to 7/8, you see that it doesn't get thrown off by anything. Not only does it send stuff across measures, but it also beams them in ways that are intuitive, which is super helpful. Okay, like I said, you can delete bar lines. So again, in that sense, Dorico, the rhythm flows across the meter, and it's totally adjustable, and you're never going to get a dialogue that says, hey, you have the wrong number of notes in the measure. You can't do that. Dorico lets you do whatever you want, and you can adjust it. Here's another difference. So here's difference number 3. In Finale, the rest is an event, and in Dorico, the notes are events, and the rests are just the absence of events. Now, if that sounds confusing, let me just show you what I mean here. So I'm going to switch to note entry by hitting Enter. You see that I have these. Let me zoom in a little bit. You see that I have these marks here, these tick marks. This is my rhythmic grid. If you see down here in my rhythmic grid, it's giving me this grid of reference point, like a quantized feature in a DAW. I can change the rhythmic grid by going here, or I can go. Let's see. I think it's Alt over. Yeah, Alt back and forth. I can adjust the value of my rhythmic grid. So let's say, okay, so Mark, you're saying, can you shift the notes by a beat? Bar 9, get rid of the rest, and shift the notes over to start in the downbeat. Yes, yes, you can totally do that. So let me just show you how that works. So you grab it here, and you just hit over, and you see that it's moving it by the rhythmic grid value that I have currently set. I'm going Control-Alt, and I'm using my arrow keys. I could also do this. If I go Shift-Alt, I'm actually changing now the value of my note. You see that it's killing the other stuff then. It's kind of enveloping those other notes and getting rid of them. However, I could either easily go to Insert Mode, and now it's nudging everything over. It's not actually getting rid of the events. it's just bumping them over. So you have all kinds of options. And what's really nice is as you keep your hands on the keyboard, on the laptop keyboard or whatever, and you learn these shortcuts, it's really easy to manipulate these things in such a way that I don't feel like my compositional process is as slowed down. Now, it is admittedly still a little slower as I'm learning it. I've had Dorico for exactly 3 weeks. And a lot of that I was finishing up the hymnal project, so I haven't been pouring into it a lot. So the point of that is not to say I'm amazing at Dorico. I'm not at all. But the point is to say it does feel very intuitive. Man, there's no question in my mind, if I have a new guy coming in, a new music student, there's no question I'm going to send them to Dorico. Finale is just harder because you have to unlearn some things. Finale's like a shoe that you've worn for a long time, and it fits you well. But man, it's not taking me long to see the advantage here. All right, so let me show you the idea of the rhythmic grid here, right? So let's see. I'm going to set my oops. Oh, now I'm switching between layouts. Here it is. Okay, yeah. So let me set my rhythmic grid back to eighth notes. Now I could easily I'm on quarter notes and I'm still in insert mode. Let me get off that. I could easily go like this, and I could put in my quarter notes. So that's fine, and we're all good with that. But what if you wanted to down here? What if you wanted to do some work here and you wanted to start this as a pickup note? Well, you don't have to enter rests. All you do is you go to your place on the grid and then you just start to type. Yeah, let me go back here because again you can't see it, but you can see that Dorico just intuitively handles those rests for you, so you don't have to create a rest. A rest is just the absence of sound, and it thinks of notes as events. That seems like maybe an esoteric concept, but again it's really helpful from the standpoint of it doesn't interrupt the compositional process. I don't have to be bothered with entering rests. I just put notes where I want them. So let's see, maybe I want to go to a different voice here, and then I'm going to start right here, and I'm still in eighth notes, and now I'm going to go. So you see that, again, it's totally smart. It just works with what I want, puts it where I want it to go, adjusts everything accordingly. So in that sense, I really like that. All right, so here's the fourth thing. In Finale, what you're tempted to do when you look at what you're entering, or maybe when you think you're done, is you want to be tempted to look at some stuff and start tweaking, just start moving and adjusting stuff. But in Dorico, instead, you're supposed to focus on what you could call global engraving options. And so when you fix your global engraving options, which by the way you can set as default with one click for any future projects, the defaults just look good 99% of the time. Or here's another way to say that. In Finale, the user is in charge of every detail, which is nice, but the user is responsible for every detail, which is not. Now in Dorico, you do have the option of changing things, to manually change things. That would be in Engrave Mode. See, in Engrave Mode, you can't add or delete notes, but you can make little kind of minor adjustments. So when you click on an event or any sorts of thing and you hit Control-8, now at the bottom, you've got stuff to play with. You can make manual adjustments, but the point is that you don't want to do that. So the first thing the Finale users do when they go, that they might be tempted to do when they go to Dorico, is they'll do a score, and then they'll start wanting to nudge things around, and don't do that. Instead, it's better to look at your global settings. So let me show you an example of that. So I've started putting into Dorico my orchestration of "Come Christians Join to Sing." I haven't gotten really far in. I just put in enough that I could show you some things. So yeah, let me jump to the flute part here. So this flute part, I did nothing to this at all. 0 adjustments. Now you may be thinking to yourself, yeah, well, there's not really many potential problems. Yeah, that's true. Let's go ahead and go back, and let me just show you some things here, and then I'll show you some easy fixes. So something like Control-Shift-N. Control-Shift-N. You think of these as general notation principles or the big pictures, and this you have control over several different categories. What I love about this too is, yes, there are menus in Dorico. You can't get around that. But the point is, they're not. You don't have to use them a lot. Just at the beginning, it's usually a one-off. And when you do, it's just very obvious what you're supposed to do. These are things that you probably wouldn't mess with, but if you wanted to, you could. I do very few tweaks here. I'll just give you an example of a tweak I do. For example, in beam grouping, do you want to allow the beams to cross the beats, or do you want to break the beams at the beat boundaries? What about something like 4/4 time? This is a really big one, right? So depending on what you want, you may have different different ways that you want to beam these things. So that's going to help. Oh, also note grouping. Here's another one. So again, at note grouping, right here, typically the convention says in 4/4 time, you visually display the third beat. Well, Dorico gives you that choice, but the point is, you're not going to go in and, so right here, if I were entering this bar, I would put in a quarter and I'd put in, a dotted quarter or whatever, or I'd make a quarter and then I'd increase its value with a shortcut. And Dorico would automatically do this instead of that. I could do force durations, which is a manual way of saying, hey, override. But the point is, you shouldn't need to do that. In general, it looks good. That's so this is notation options. Let me show you another one. Control Shift L. This is layout options. So this is where you set your rastral size for your staff sizes. Let me just adjust it here. So I could go, if I go to 8, let me move it over a little bit so you can see it. Hit apply. You can see it's adjusting, and it's adjusting everything really nicely. It's got just a great kind of automatic engine that spaces everything. I got page size, page margins. What's some other stuff that I shift here? Oh, in time signatures, you can do large time signatures, which is really helpful. They typically use that in film scores. I'm actually finding myself wanting to use them more just even in my orchestrations. Because look, the most basic thing you need to know is where is the meter changing and how do I adjust that? So that's just huge. And again, in Finale, you can do large time signatures, but I added it up. It is 12 steps to make that happen. Dorico, it's just one, set it, forget it. By the way, you can see that you can do that for different things. So I wouldn't want large time signatures in my instrumental parts. But perhaps I wanted to make a change to just my flutes. I hit Shift click. Or perhaps I want to make a change to all of my brass, and I want to have layout options stylistically based on different things. I can easily do that. What's another tweak I do? Vertical spacing. This one is hugely important. This is an area in which guys tend to do a lot of little bumping and nudging and tweaking. So if you're familiar with Finale, you're used to making a score, and then you go to a part and you go, ugh, man, that looks bad. And then what do? You start nudging stuff around. Well, you don't do that. Just don't. I mean, you can. I'll show you later. But here you have vertical spacing set for you ahead of time. You set your default. Now you can set it to different things that you like. Generally, their defaults are good. You have so many options. So yeah, I'm a fan of that. Bar numbers, whatever you want. And let me show you one final one. Control Shift E takes you to Engraving Options. In Engraving Options, you can think of this as kind of the details, right? So let's look at something like bars, bar lines. This is one that I changed from the default. I like a thinner bar line, so I think it was set to 1/6, typically 1/6 of a space. I set it to 1/10. I like thinner bar lines. I also did that with under staves. Under staves, I set my staff thickness to 1. Well, actually, I did it to 1/10. I like that better. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Let's see if you can. Yeah, I don't know if it'll show up for you in your resolution, but I like that. It's just a crispier kind of look. You can set that however you want. Let's take a look at chord symbols. So these are really, really cool. And this is an example of where I told you. This is where I told you that what Dorico does is it on 1 month it'll be like, oh yeah, we can't do that yet, we're working on it, and then a month later they roll out an update that says, oh yeah, we can do that now, and in fact ours is the best that you've ever seen. That's the case with chord symbols. So for chord symbols, I mean, look at these dialogues. It's just an embarrassment of riches, right? So you've got all these different ways that you can set these. Most of this might not apply to you. A couple things that I like to change from the defaults. Let me find it here. Right here. So default, I think for a sus4 chord, they want this. I want that. and I leave the sus2 as a sus2. So you set all this stuff, and then it's just done. And by the way, you can type in chords. It recognizes stuff. You're not going to get dialogues that said, hey, we don't recognize that. You need to create. So in Finale, you have full control over a chord suffix font editor, which is great. But again, it requires all this work. Here's a big one. Look at this. Vertical positioning. So you can set your ideal vertical positioning and distance above items protruding from staff. This is, again, the smart resizing engine. It will avoid collisions as you tell it to. Here's another one. I think the default is left alignment, and I actually prefer center alignment. If you went left with an alignment, you can do it with a little offset. You can do that. Look at the kind of control you have. But the whole point is that philosophically, this is different. You set the control globally, and by the way, you click Save as Default. Then it's just done. You don't have to do it again. It's just set. It looks good. It looks the way you want it. It looks like what you want it to look. Lyrics. So here's another one. Lyric spacing. Now, one thing that Dorico does not have yet that I need, not just want but need, is to be able to adjust vertical bass lines independently per each staff system manually. They don't yet do that. I'm sure they will. In fact, Daniel Spreadbury had said, yeah, that's something we're looking at. And they don't. I've just found every time that they've been really open. If there's something that said, yeah, we might do that, but that's a ways off, they mean it. If they say, yeah, we're working on this and considering it, take it to the bank. It's going to happen in a month or so. So a lot of control over lyric spacing, the use of hyphens, extender lines. Again, you can go in and manually adjust this stuff if you want to, but the point is you want to not have to, and that is indeed the case here. Just one more kind of random thing. Let's see, rehearsal mark alignment, right? So you can have control over your rehearsal marks. Here's a big one. This one always bugged me in Finale. So Finale, by default, it's always left aligned with the bar line for the system. But here, you can have the option to align it just to the right of the clef and key signatures. I always prefer that, and that's just a step in Finale I always had to get used to having to do. Well, this is set. Vertical distance, you get the idea. And for every one of these kind of nuance categories, this is where you have your full control. You can do whatever you want to do. So again, this is all under the category of how much tweaking do you want to do. If you're the kind of guy who wants to prep a score and then wants to go in and tweak it manually, I mean, man, bless your heart, have at it. I've been there, and if you enjoy that, great. I don't. And I'd rather have it look good out of the box. If I have to make changes, I will. But you pretty much don't have to. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like practically. So let's look at this first measure of Come Christians Join to Sing in the piano part. You can see this piano staff's a little closer together. I could modify that in the vertical spacing if I wanted to. But instead, I'm just going to put some stuff in and let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm in setup mode. Sorry, let me go to write mode. Let's add some dynamics. So Shift D, fortissimo. Okay, you see it spaces it automatically. Let's add some slurs. Yeah, let's see here. Doop-de-doo. Slur, boom. Let's add an accent mark. Yeah, right there. So you can see that it's just adjusting everything on the fly. And oh, here, let's do something else, right? So hold down. So you never play it like this, but you see the point. The point is this: it is the layout is dynamic and will adjust based on the conventions that you set for it. And again, that's hugely helpful. That is totally time saved. Oh, okay. So slurs, yeah. So let's talk about slurs. So the way that I like to think about it, about slurring, is I found already, and this is what other guys are saying as well. It's typically better to enter. Let me switch to a different view here. It's typically better to enter your notes and then you go across like this with the arrows, right? This function is still a little bit of a work in progress. Up, down takes you to different staves, different voices, different everything, and I like that. Let's see, your question is, press spacebar and it snaps to the next and the next and the next. Yeah, so here's the way you do that. So as you're going along in your thing, if you just hit S, it'll snap to the next slur automatically, right? If you hold down Shift and go over with the arrow and then hit S, it does the thing that you want. So what I'm doing is I'm going through the score, right? And I'm going through and I'm just going and I'm hitting my slurs, one slur here. Let me do a nested slur. Okay, there's one slur plus two slurs. Let's go one slur plus two slurs plus three slurs. That looks goofy, but the point is you can do that. So what you're doing is then you're going through, also you have shortcuts for articulations, right? So here's my staccato. I can staccato a bunch of stuff. I could select several, and I could hit an accent mark. So in that sense, it's really dynamic that you're moving through, and what you're not doing is you're not moving the mouse everywhere, and you don't have dialog boxes popping up. So it goes a lot. Now again, this doesn't look great, but you know, there's a limit to what you know what I mean. I think that's what it would look like. I mean, it's, you know, it's just a lot to it. So anyways, this is cool. Yes. Oh, can you enter slurs while you're doing notes? Yes, you can. So let's say I'm in note entry. Let me just give you a simple example. I'm going to be in note entry. I have 6 selected for quarter notes, and I'm going to do 4 quarter notes, and I'm going to slur them right away. So I hit S, and you notice that right here when I hit S, this is active. So now when I go deem, beam, 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 now I hit Shift S, and I stop, and I can keep going. So yeah, you can enter them totally at the same time. It's a little different functionality than what you're saying, somewhat. I did find it interesting that, you know, they had interviewed Daniel and they'd asked him about comparative functionality. He said, on one hand, we don't really care what other programs do. We do have a workflow. We believe in it. So they're obviously, you know, they're recognized not everything is a bad idea. But yeah, some things are definitely different. I just find, again, like I said, even after years in Finale, I don't miss it. You know, I just don't miss it at all. Here's me going up chromatically. Here's me going up. Here's me going up diatonically. Here's me going up by an octave. Super easy. Oh, check this out. Shift I. Let's make a third above all these. Yeah. Okay. Let's undo that. Actually, what I meant to do, maybe I wanted to go Shift I, and I wanted to go a third below. -3. Boom. There it is. It's just no end. And the point is, nobody cares that it's cool. What we want is ease of use so that we don't feel that the compositional process is hindered. What's the shortcut to go up and down an octave? So the typical one is Control-Alt and then up and down when you've selected a note. I actually mapped shortcuts to do the minus and plus. I have a full numeric keypad on my right side, and I use the minus and plus to shift my octaves. I found that easier. Okay, let me go on here. Okay, so if you need to tweak, you do have what we call engraving mode. So in engraving mode is what we call non-destructive. You cannot add or delete notes. So, you know, if I select this and I hit enter, I cannot get to note entry. I can't go on a note and hit delete. It doesn't work. The point of engraving mode and write mode being separate is that they have separate functions. You do all your work in write mode. You see what Dorico gives you, and then if there's something you really don't like that you have to change, which will happen, then you go into engraving mode and you can start to make some changes. And you can make any sorts of changes you want. These are the changes that you recognize from Finale, right? And by the way, when you select an element, if you hit Control-8, you can toggle off and on this guy here at the bottom that shows up for us, right? So let me switch back to write mode a second. So maybe I have a Shift D. I want to do a forte. I'll put a forte in here. I switch to engrave mode, and let me zoom in here. Oops, sorry. Control-3. I'm still learning it. Let's say I want to move this over here. So here it is. Oh, look, it collides with the bar line. Boom. Erase background. Makes this sweet little thing. But the point is, I do have fine-grained control. However, what you'll notice is that if I am in engrave mode, when I drag this guy around, he never switches to a different thing, because engrave mode doesn't change data. It just changes the look. So in engrave mode, you're answering the question, how is my final score going to appear? Not, what are the elements in my score? So that's really helpful. So let me show you some things you can do in Engrave Mode. Let me zoom out here a little bit. I'll talk about some of this other stuff later. So, so frames. No, I won't talk about that yet. Let me talk about staff spacing. This is one that makes sense to us the most. Here's how, if you need to move some stuff, this is how you would do it. By the way, I'll hold down, I think it's Alt. Yes, Alt grabs all of them and nudges them down. Just grabbing it by itself, and you can always hit the Control Z function to undo, or Command Z on Mac, is comprehensive. In fact, some people have complained it's too thorough because it even logs keystrokes. But the point is you can always Control Z to go back to anything. What I like about this is you turn things on and off as you need them. So I'll turn staff spacing off, now it's locked. Now I'll turn note spacing on. See, now I have, this is the kind of control that you expect in Finale, but you shouldn't need it. Because if you really wanted to change note spacing, then you would go to Control-Shift-L, and you'd make your adjustments here, hopefully. And that will take care of 99% of your problems. Let's see, let's look at some other stuff. So let me go over to my flute layout here. So here's where we start to talk about frames a little bit. Boy, I'm going to resist the urge to go into it in detail, except to try to sell you on how cool they are. Here's something here. So I am going to select a note, and I'm going to insert a system break, either by clicking here or by hitting Shift S. You see that Dorico doesn't care where you insert a system break. It doesn't get upset that you're breaking measures. It just does it, which is really helpful. And you'll notice that here you get a little marker, I think it's called. Yeah, it doesn't show up on the finished product, but it just shows you, hey, this is where stuff is happening. You could also do a frame break. So let me go here and let me click frame break. Now it's bumped everything over, and you see there's even an option to justify, meaning to space out evenly the stuff in your score. You can always override that if you want. These are frames. Frames are good. Frames took me some time to get used to. Let me turn on the frame editor here, and let me zoom in a little bit. So a frame is just a group of text or music or whatever. I'm going to nudge it up. You see when I do that, everything bumps to the next line. Now, what's really cool about that, if you hang with me here, let's say, I wouldn't do this, but let's just say I've got this, and I want to put some text in here, and then I want to resume my my writing. So here we go. This is some text. It's really small, I know. I could format it pretty comprehensively. You got control over the kerning or the spacing of the font itself, all sorts of options. Let's say I had a bunch of text in here, and then I wanted to resume my music. No problem. I'm just going to create a new frame. Let me zoom in here. Now you see this frame started over. I don't want it to start over. Instead, I want to go back, and I'm going to select MA. When I do that, it goes and it resumes what I had before. So this is beautiful. If you're so what the guys had said was, we want this to kind of combine word processing kind of functionality. So if you're writing a paper and you want to do this, and you want to write in stuff, or you have scholarly edition, no problem. You can flow from frame to frame. I'm going to go down to the bottom here. I'm going to drag this frame up, and at the bottom here, I'm going to add another frame. Let's just pretend this was the first page, and I wanted to do an incipit, a little sample of each. I could easily do that. I could just set it up. There it is. They're totally controllable. These are frames. So that's all I'm going to talk about there. There's a whole world of stuff in there that's super helpful. I don't have really time to talk about master pages, but this is where you set stuff up just like InDesign, and you set up your formatting, and then you apply master pages, yada yada. Super nice. Let me just talk about a couple more sort of big picture things, or not big picture, I guess kind of cool details that you can do here. So let me go back to write mode, and I'm going to go back to my full score. All right. Oh, by the way, so Aaron or anybody, there's a 30-day trial, free trial you can get. That's what I recommend. And here's my big recommendation. Watch the tutorials first on YouTube. If you jump in and try to do this, you will find it frustrating because it's different. What I did is, for literally a week and a half, I didn't touch it. I just watched tutorials. I memorized shortcuts. It was admittedly, it was like learning it in classroom before you do it. So it doesn't mean I was an expert. But when I got to Dorico, it just felt familiar then, and I knew what to do. I didn't have to go searching. So that's my suggestion. All right, let me just show you a couple other things that will absolutely sell you if you're not already sold. Specifically in the realm of things that take time. So here's my flutes. Now this is not fleshed out, but let's see where oh, here he is. Okay, I'm just gonna put in some stuff. Shift L. Alleluia. Amen. Okay, so let's just jump in here, and these flutes, let's say I want a cue for them, right? So I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna hit. Let me get rid of this. Let me zoom in a little bit. I'm gonna hit Shift U, and where do I want it to cue from? Let's start typing lead. There it is. I did it. Hit Enter. Now it doesn't show up here, but because that's in the full score, and you don't want it to show up in the full score. But if you go to your if you go to your flute part, now remember I messed with my frames and stuff, so it looks a little weird. But if you go to your flute part, boom, there it is. Now the thing is, this is dynamic. So if I change it, let me go back. Oops. Let me go back to my part here, and let me let's just say that I want to change this note. Now when I go back to my flute part, you can see it adjusts it on the fly. So cues are automatic, and there's all kinds of other cue features. I don't have time to talk about that. All right, let me go back. Let me show you something else. Oh, I'm scrolling through the wrong way. Let me show you something really cool called lock durations. Now this is a really helpful from specifically a compositional and arranging standpoint. So let me find a spot. Let's see. Okay, where was it? Oh, okay. So I have this this violin line. Bum 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 bum. Let's say I want to grab that, and I'm gonna copy it and I'm gonna paste it. Now that's not particularly amazing, but let's say that the violin 2 is going to be doing something very similar. But I don't want to have to re-enter all this data. I just want different notes. Well, I can go to note input mode like I did. I can go lock durations, and I can go, and I can just enter my notes, and you see that it's copying everything over. Now, I did too many notes, so it's still working on it. Whatever, you get the idea. It's copying everything over using the lock durations function. So that means I don't have to re-enter this data. I can literally just grab the stuff. I can keep the same idea, and I can go down and say I just want different notes. And of course, you could change them. You could change any stuff you want to, but lock durations is beautiful. Explode music. So let's see. I kind of penciled in a little example here. Let's explode some music. Let's say here. So here, this is coming out of the end of my big interlude, and I fleshed out some piano stuff here. I'm gonna shift click. I'm gonna hit copy, and let me go down and I'm gonna right click here. I'm gonna go paste special explode. So what it does is it automatically then takes this. Now you notice that some of these were in octaves. I had fewer than 4 parts. The number of parts varied, but it doesn't care. It's happy to work with however I do it. So explode music is really handy if you want to, if you want to flesh out something on the piano in kind of blocked chords, and then you want to just barf it onto a whole brass section or whatever. It's very easy to do. You can also go in reverse, and it has a really, really beautiful reduce option. So paste special, reduce. If you want to copy some stuff, and it makes very nice piano reductions of stuff. And I will say it doesn't take much tweaking. Now, obviously, if you've got lots of stuff spread all over the place, you might end up with stuff that a pianist couldn't play. But the point is, it does a nice job of it. You can always go in and tweak it. Saves a huge amount of work. Let me show you some other really cool things. So let's see here. Okay, so here's a horn line. Watch this. I'm going to click in the middle of the measure, and I'm going to hit the dot. So that's with so this is with the insert mode turned off, and you see what it does is it automatically just grabs that and it adjusts the dots. Now if I turn insert mode on, it actually moves all those and shifts them over by the value of the dot. But the point is, if you've got a lot of dotted rhythms and you don't want to enter them in, just enter them in as straight quarters or eighths or whatever, then hit your dot. And by the way, I could just go like this. I could click on the bar line or on the beam here, and I could just dot. Oops, I'm still in insert mode. Sorry. I could hit the beam, and now I've got some nice dotted rhythms. So the whole point here, as you can see, is time saved. Okay, let's look at increased durations. So let's say I want a figure like a half note tied to an eighth. I could do a half note and enter it. I could do T for tie, and I could enter an eighth. Or I could just do, let's say, that, and then I could grab my, I think it's Shift Alt. Yeah, Shift Alt and over, and I can just increase my duration of my note by whatever grid, again, that I'm using. If I want to change my grid, I can always do that really easily. So these are just lots of shortcuts, quick ways to manipulate, either destructively or non-destructively if you want to turn on the insert mode and just nudge everything. All those features are there. The shortcuts do not take long. There's general sorts of principles like control tends to be fine-grained control. Shift tends to be larger control. So even in regards to shifting, do I want to nudge up a chromatic, a diatonic, or an octave? Easy to grab and throw around. Does it take much time getting used to Dorico note entry compared from Finale speedy entry? Yes. Well, let me say it this way. I had a training session with a guy the other day, and I said, hey, I got to admit, this is taking time. He's like, stick with it. He said, trust me, treat it like practicing a scale. He said, stick with it, and I promise you, you play. So watch this. I'm going to play some scales. I'm totally on just the computer keyboard now. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. So it does it go faster? Yes, absolutely. I had to get used to the 6 and the 7. Being shifted, from Finale. Like I said, I mapped. Maybe I didn't say. I mapped my numbers and my dot to my keypad. I think that should be standard. Because I don't want to take my right hand off that. So my right hand is always there, whether I'm using the MIDI keyboard or the speedy entry just on the physical keyboard. Either way, my right hand is always on my keypad, and if I'm using MIDI, my left hand is on my MIDI. The one thing that I particularly don't like in Dorico regarding entry is when I have to do chords. So there's a feature called Q, which allows you to stack up chords. I remapped that Q to be intervals. So if I've entered a note and I hit Q and I go 3, it gives me a chord, and I can move on without having to get out of chord mode. I like that better. It's still not, to me, as intuitive as I used to use Speedy and just use my arrow keys to move my cursor and then use my up-down caret, to say I want this pitch on the staff and hit enter or whatever. That's taken some time to get used to. Typically, if there's a lot of chorded stuff, I'm going to use a MIDI keyboard, but I am getting faster at using the interval feature, which I do like. And again, if I've got something like this, I just shifted to select 3, go Q3, enter. It's pretty fast. So I have to be honest, that's not too bad. Let's talk about something called the filter. So the filter is awesome. Let me just type in a little bit of stuff here, and then I'll show you kind of what the filter can do, right? So this note is totally wrong. There we go. Let me just hit Shift Q, and I'm going to start to type in some chords. All right, so here's a section, and let's say that I want some of this stuff, but not all of it. I have so I'm shift clicking. I have a really powerful feature here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select filter. I can select only certain things or deselect only certain things. I'm going to deselect only. Now what I don't like is you have to click again if you change from select to deselect. But filter deselect only chord symbols. Now I don't have my chord symbols, and I can copy and paste this elsewhere without the chords. I could do the opposite. However, it is much more powerful than that. Check this out. So I'm going to grab a section, and I'm going to go filter I'm going to select only, and again, because I'm changing from deselect to select, I have to go back again. Filter, select only, notes in chords, bottom note. Boom. Now watch this. Alt-M. I am sending this down by staff, just this bit. I'm grabbing it and sending it elsewhere. So cool. Of course, I could have just hit Control-C at that point if I didn't want to lose it from where it was, and I could have just copied it elsewhere. But if I actually want to move it, yeah, that's pretty cool. So the filter option, there's a lot to explore there. I love it a lot. Piano fingerings. So let's talk about piano fingerings. Here's something else. In Finale, it was not easy to do. I did not make the score. This came with Dorico. Piano fingerings are very simple. You select the note, you hit Shift F to bring up the fingerings dialog, you hit the fingering, and you're done. Now you have a couple other options. You could do, let's take a look at here, 1 parentheses 2 to show alternate fingerings. You could do where you move fingerings, so 2-3. Now I have it where I shift, and I'm going to move this guy over, and I'm going to say that this fingering is going to change over the course of time. What about if I have a chord? So here's a chord. I'm going to go, yeah, sorry. And I'm going to go 5, 3, 2, whatever. I don't know that that's what I want. Oops. For some reason, oh, there we go. Sorry, Shift F. 5, 3, 2. You noticed that I could have, well, you didn't notice. I could have entered them in a different order. Dorico is smart, and it knows that if this is the right hand, and so it's going to put it in ascending order. I don't use piano fingerings, but I know a lot of people do, and if you do, it's super helpful. Plus, you know, if you're doing a scholarly addition, you can bracket, you can parenthesize, you can do all sorts of things to indicate. By the way, you have some options here. So Control 8, right? I can hit this. I can do all sorts of things that I want to do if I want to change stuff. The point is you have the control, but the control is hidden on a second layer. All right, what time is it here? It's 2 o'clock. I don't want to take it longer than an hour, so let me just wrap up. Boy, gosh, I want to talk about master pages. I didn't get a chance to do that. Play mode. I'm not going to get into that today, and there's not a lot of stuff here to even show you, but if you had the full thing here, this is basically like a DAW. You can do your virtual instruments, which is pretty slick. You can load in different instruments. You can load in your own stuff. That's awesome and amazing. I've avoided this right now because I'm kind of waiting on that. I want to get good I want to get very proficient at entering and creating the score, and then later I'm going to say, okay, now I'm going to allow myself to get into the play feature. By the way, I've heard something called Note Performer. Some of you have used that for Sibelius. Note Performer 3 is out for Dorico now, and basically, if you're a guy like me, I can tweak on a DAW, but I don't like to. I just want my score to sound good. Note Performer does that. It's an additional cost, worth every penny from what I hear, because it makes the score sound so good right out of the box. So I think that's pretty much it. I don't see any other questions right now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure this video is posted, and you know, if you have any other questions, Steinberg's Dorico team is very helpful. Get on the Dorico forums online. Get onto the Dorico Facebook page. All kinds of their employees they're just there all the time and patiently answering all sorts of questions. There's a really robust community of guys. So yeah, hope you find it useful for your needs. Thanks everybody. See you later.